I called my mom right after giving birth to my daughter. She laughed. I'm busy with your sister's birthday party. Why bring more trash like you into the world? My sister yelled in the back, you ruined my special day. What a selfish time to give birth. I hung up with a shaking voice and held my baby while fighting tears. But the next day they stood in front of me, begging. Night falls early in winter in Boston. Melissa Green gazed at the snow that had begun to fall outside the hospital window and took a quiet deep breath. The cell phone in her white coat pocket vibrated, and the screen displayed a message from Thomas, hang in there today. I'll make dinner. Melissa couldn't help but smile. Thomas, whom she had married 3 years ago, was the kindest person she had ever met. As a pediatrician working at the same Massachusetts General Hospital, he always looked after Melissa in between his busy shifts. Miss Green, the patient in room 607 is calling for you. A colleague's voice brought her back to reality, and Melissa hurried down the hallway. With 10 years of experience as a nurse, she had a good reputation among patients. She was especially good with children and had worked in the pediatric ward for a long time. On her way home after finishing her shift that day, Melissa began to feel a bit unwell. For the past few weeks she had been suffering from morning sickness and fatigue. At first she thought it was just a seasonal flu, but since the symptoms persisted, she had finally taken a test yesterday. The results would be available tomorrow. When she arrived at the apartment, delicious cooking aromas were already coming from the kitchen. Thomas, as promised, was preparing dinner. Seeing his tall, strong figure from behind always filled Melissa with a sense of security. I'm home. Welcome back, Mel. Thomas turned around and kissed her. How was your day? Busy as usual. Do you know some people earn over $10,000 a month just by posting Reddit stories on YouTube? No face, no voice, just a laptop. I'd do it too, link below if you're curious. But I'm fine. Melissa forced a smile. After dinner they sat on the sofa watching TV. Melissa absently placed her hand on her abdomen. If the results were as she expected, she caught her breath. What's wrong? Thomas looked at her with concern. Just thinking. Melissa paused before continuing. By the way, my test results will be ready tomorrow. The next morning, Melissa's prediction was confirmed. She was pregnant. As she emerged from the hospital's testing room, her face showed a mixture of joy and anxiety. She quickly called Thomas, who was overjoyed, and rushed to her location immediately. Mel, really? Thomas embraced her, tears glistening in his eyes. Our baby. I can't believe it. Melissa looked at her husband with tears streaming down her face. Thomas, we're going to be parents. However, Melissa vaguely realized that not everyone in the family would share this joy. Her first call was to Thomas's parents, Robert and Eleanor. They immediately expressed their delight and said they would come to celebrate right away. In contrast, when she informed her mother Diane, the response was cold. Trying to get attention again? Ashley just got her promotion? Diane's voice contained mockery. Melissa's sister Ashley worked at a marketing company. Like their mother, she didn't seem particularly happy about Melissa's pregnancy either. What has Melissa done now? Ashley's voice could be heard on the other end of the phone. Melissa took a deep breath to maintain her composure. Since childhood, she had been belittled by her mother and sister. Until her father William passed away 5 years ago, he was the only one in the family who truly cherished her. Congratulations, Mel, were her mother's final words before hanging up, but Melissa knew they weren't sincere. Thomas's parents were completely different. Robert, a successful physician, and Eleanor, who headed a local charity organization, had welcomed Melissa like their own daughter from the day they first met her. Melissa, I'm so happy to welcome you to our family, Eleanor said at that evening's dinner, holding her hand. You'll need a lot of support from now on, so please don't hesitate to ask for anything. Thank you so much, Melissa replied with heartfelt gratitude. That night, as Melissa lay in bed, she whispered to the tiny life inside her belly, I'm waiting for you to be born. You deserve to be the most loved being in this world. Thomas, sleeping beside her, unconsciously stretched his arm toward her. Melissa felt safe in his embrace. Soon they would be a family of 3. The loving, real family she had always wanted was finally taking shape. Maybe once the baby is born, my mother and sister will change, Melissa hoped as she closed her eyes. As the pregnancy progressed, Melissa's body began to change. Despite battling occasional severe nausea and fatigue, she continued her work as a nurse. And then, when she was 7 months pregnant, something unexpected happened. Thomas, where are you? Melissa clutched her phone with trembling hands. Though still 2 weeks before her due date, she had awakened at 3 a.m. to sudden, intense pain and realized her water had broken. As a nurse, she immediately recognized these were real contractions. Mel, are you okay? Did something happen? Thomas's voice sounded distant, with the faint noise of a convention hall audible on the other end. He had left 2 days earlier to attend an international pediatric medicine conference in Chicago. The baby, it's coming now, Melissa answered, grimacing in pain. My water broke. What? But we still had 2 weeks to go. Thomas's voice immediately grew serious. Call a taxi right away. I'll look for the earliest flight back to Boston. I'll call Eleanor too. Thank you, she managed to say before the next contraction hit. Melissa barely managed to call a taxi and headed to Massachusetts General Hospital where she worked. Upon arrival, the obstetrics team was already waiting for her. Her colleagues immediately sat her in a wheelchair and rushed her to the delivery room. How many minutes apart are they coming, Dr. Green? Dr. Summers, the obstetrician asked in a calm voice. About 7 minutes. Melissa answered, catching her breath. But they're getting closer together. After basic examinations, Dr. Summers told her, your cervix is only dilated 3 centimeters. This might be a long battle, but you'll be fine. Less than an hour after Melissa lay down in the delivery room, the door opened and Eleanor rushed in, looking pale. Melissa, are you all right? Thomas called me. Eleanor took her hand and looked at her with concern. Eleanor, thank you for coming. Melissa's face showed relief. What are you saying? You're my daughter. How could I not be by your side at a time like this? Eleanor gently wiped Melissa's sweaty forehead. Tears welled up in Melissa's eyes. Would her own mother have responded like this? She wondered whether she should call Diane but didn't want to hear cold words from her mother at this moment. The contractions intensified over time. 6 hours had passed, and her cervix had only dilated to 5 centimeters. Not yet, the obstetrician said. Shaking with pain, Melissa continued a video call with Thomas. He promised to head to Boston on the next flight and continued to encourage her. Until then, Mel, you're strong. I'll definitely make it in time. Don't forget to breathe deeply. Eleanor remained by her side, offering words of encouragement. During the brief respites between contractions, Melissa drifted into memories of the past. As a child, she had always lived in Ashley's shadow. When Melissa came in third at a school sports day, her mother said, Ashley would have been first. When she went to college, her choice was belittled, so you're just becoming a nurse. Ashley is in business school. Only her father supported her dream. Nursing is a profession that saves lives. Melissa, your kindness is your strength, he had said. Even at her wedding, Diane and Ashley's attitudes were cold. Ashley refused to be a bridesmaid, and Diane barely involved herself in the wedding preparations. Instead, Eleanor and Robert provided full support, rejoicing as if it were their own daughter's wedding. Another wave of pain pulled Melissa back from her thoughts. Eleanor, she forced out words between labored breaths. If I don't think like that, Eleanor interrupted her. Both you and the baby will be fine. We're here with you. Melissa's strength was reaching its limit. Concern showed on Dr. Summers' face as well. Your cervix is dilated to 8 centimeters, but I'm a bit worried about the baby's heartbeat. Is the baby in danger? Melissa asked, trembling with fear. We're not at that stage yet. But if there's no progress, we might need to consider a C-section. Eleanor squeezed her hand even tighter. Whatever happens, we're here with you. Just then the delivery room door burst open and Thomas rushed in, out of breath. Mel. Thomas. Relief spread across Melissa's face. You made it. Of course, he hurried to her side and kissed her sweaty forehead. You've done well while I was away. An hour after Thomas's arrival, Melissa's cervix finally fully dilated. It's time, Melissa. Push with all your might during the next contraction, Dr. Summers instructed. With encouragement from Thomas and her mother-in-law, Melissa pushed with all her strength. Fighting to stay conscious through the pain and exhaustion, she held on desperately. I can see the head. Just a little more. Dr. Summers' voice seemed to come from far away. With one final push using all her remaining strength, suddenly the room filled with the sound of a baby crying. It's a girl. A very healthy girl. Dr. Summers announced with tears in her eyes. The baby was immediately placed on Melissa's chest. A tiny wrinkled face, a head with just a hint of hair and small fingers slightly open. Melissa was overwhelmed by a wave of love beyond this world. Hello, Emma, she whispered to the baby. I've been waiting for you to come. Thomas gazed at his wife and daughter, unable to hold back his tears. Mel, thank you. She's our daughter. Eleanor also shed tears at the birth of her granddaughter while taking pictures with her camera. She's perfect. I must let Robert know. Melissa was enveloped in the ultimate happiness, surrounded by those who loved her. But somewhere in her heart, she wished her real mother and sister could share this joy too. Holding the baby in her arms, she resolved, this time Mom will surely be happy. Thomas, can I call my mother? Melissa asked her husband a bit anxiously. Of course, Mel. Thomas understood her determination and handed her his mobile phone. She must be happy about the birth of her grandchild. Melissa took a deep breath and dialed her mother's number. While gently cradling the baby in her arms, she waited for her mother to answer. This time, maybe our relationship will change, she thought, as she looked at her daughter for the first time. Emma was breathing peacefully. Hello, Diane Green speaking. Her mother's voice came through the phone. Music and laughter could be heard in the background. Mom, it's me, Melissa said with her heart pounding. The baby was born? It's a girl. I'm thinking of naming her Emma. From the other end of the phone, after a moment of silence, came Diane's cold laugh. I'm busy with Ashley's birthday party right now. What's the point of bringing more trash like you into this world? Melissa gasped. At these unbelievable words, she felt the blood drain from her body. Tightening her arms around the baby, she searched for words. Mom, how could you? But from the other end of the phone came even more painful words. Ashley's high-pitched voice could be heard in the background. Ruining my special day. What selfish timing. Large tears fell from Melissa's eyes, trailing down her cheeks and dripping onto the baby's clothing. Her hands trembled, and her voice shook. I'm sorry, seems like I interrupted. With just those words, Melissa hung up. All that remained in the room was the sound of her uncontrollable sobbing and the innocent, peaceful breathing of the sleeping baby. Melissa held Emma to her chest and cried, trying to stifle her voice. Melissa, what's wrong? Eleanor, who had returned from the hallway, stood frozen at the entrance to the hospital room. Seeing Melissa's state, she immediately rushed to her side. What happened? Eleanor immediately understood the situation after reading everything in Melissa's face. You called them, didn't you? Melissa could only nod. With a wounded heart, she held her daughter protectively, as if trying to shield the baby from her mother's words. At that moment, Thomas returned to the room. Seeing his wife's condition, he immediately sat beside her. Mel, what happened? His voice was full of concern. My mother. Melissa choked on her words. She called me trash and Emma too. Eleanor's face changed in an instant. Her normally gentle expression filled with intense anger. Though she was a dignified 63-year-old woman, in this moment, her eyes held a steely strength. That is unforgivable, Eleanor said in a low voice. Absolutely unforgivable. Thomas's face had hardened as well. He placed his hand on his wife's shoulder and embraced her tightly. Mel, you'll be the best mother. Emma will grow up in the best environment. Don't worry about what they say. But Eleanor had already taken action. She took out her own mobile phone and dialed Diane's number. Eleanor, stop, Melissa said weakly. I don't want to make things worse. But Eleanor was determined. No, Melissa. This isn't just a difference of opinion. This is a matter of humanity. As soon as the call connected, Eleanor's voice resonated through the room. Diane Green? This is Eleanor Hamilton. Oh, Eleanor? Diane's voice suddenly turned pleasant. What can I do for you? I heard what you just said to your daughter who has just given birth. Eleanor's voice was cold and sharp. I have never met anyone who would call a newborn trash. What? That was just a joke. Diane hurriedly made excuses. Melissa always takes our jokes too seriously. A joke? Eleanor's voice grew even sterner. I cannot understand what you think is funny. Would you like your reputation to spread among Boston's charity circles about someone who speaks and acts like you do? Diane was at a loss for words. Eleanor Hamilton was a person of significant influence in the local community. Eleanor, that's furthermore, Eleanor continued mercilessly. Robert, as the administrator of Williams's estate, will have to reconsider the monthly support to you both. The sound of Diane catching her breath could be heard on the other end of the phone. William Green's estate was an important source of income supporting Diane and Ashley's lifestyle. As its administrator, Robert Hamilton had the authority to determine the monthly payments. Wait, Eleanor, Diane's tone suddenly changed to pleading. There's a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Eleanor said firmly. Your words were recorded. Thomas's smartphone voice memo has recorded everything. Of course this was a lie. But Diane had no way of knowing that. She was clearly distressed. Please, Eleanor. We're family. Real family doesn't treat each other this way, Eleanor stated calmly. Melissa and Emma are our family. Whether you are part of that family depends on your actions from now on. With that, Eleanor hung up. A heavy silence fell over the room. Thomas was already operating his own phone. I've posted about Melissa's delivery and her mother's comments in the family group chat, he said quietly. Dad knows by now. Melissa was confused. Thomas, Eleanor, you didn't have to. No, Melissa, Eleanor said gently but firmly. Sometimes it's necessary to draw boundaries. This isn't just to protect you. It's to protect Emma too. At that moment, Thomas's phone rang. It was from Robert. Thomas answered and briefly explained the situation. Robert's angry voice resonated from the phone loud enough for Melissa and Eleanor to hear in the room. I will stop the support immediately. The contract includes a clause for if the recipient behaves inappropriately toward the trustee's family. This clearly falls under that category. Thomas nodded and hung up. Dad has taken action. He says the legal procedures will be completed today. Melissa lay in bed, trying to understand all that had happened. She looked at Emma. The baby was sleeping peacefully on her mother's chest. Tiny hands, round cheeks, lips moving slightly. How could anyone call this innocent being trash? I'll be strong, Melissa said in a small voice. For Emma. That night, Melissa couldn't sleep. But it wasn't because of sadness, it was because of a new determination and a sense of mission to protect her daughter. In her arms, Emma slept peacefully. Outside the window, stars shone in the Boston night sky. Melissa felt a new strength growing within her for the first time. The next morning, there was a knock at the hospital room door. Melissa, it's us. Hearing that voice, Melissa's body tensed immediately. On the other side of the door were Diane and Ashley. She readjusted her hold on Emma and took a deep breath to calm herself. Come in, she answered in a small voice. The door opened, and Diane and Ashley appeared. Both looked more disheveled than she had ever seen them. Diane's hair was messy, and her usually perfect makeup was smudged. Ashley wore glasses and sneakers instead of her usual high heels. They each carried large bouquets of flowers and gift bags. Melissa. Diane approached her daughter with tearful eyes. I'm sorry. Really, really sorry. We meant it as a joke yesterday, Ashley added. She too spoke in a small voice, quite different from her usual arrogant attitude. Just fooling around that got out of hand. Melissa stared at them, unsure how to respond. Yesterday's words echoed too vividly in her head to be easily forgiven. However, her usual desire to avoid conflict and maintain family peace still lingered in her heart. I understand, she finally said. But those words were, I know. They were terrible, Diane quickly interjected. She placed the bouquet on the nightstand and a small present on the edge of the bed. We truly regret it. Can we see our granddaughter? Melissa hesitated but raised Emma slightly in her arms so they could see. Her name is Emma. What a beautiful child, Diane whispered. May I hold her? Before Melissa could answer, the hospital room door opened again. Thomas and Eleanor entered. Their faces showed surprise and caution. Good morning. Thomas's voice was cold. He approached his wife's bed and placed his hand protectively on her shoulder. This is an unexpected visit. Diane and Ashley's attitudes changed instantly. They quickly turned to Eleanor with forced smiles. Eleanor, good morning, Diane said in a sweet voice. It seems there was a misunderstanding yesterday. We never intended to hurt Melissa or the baby. Yes, Ashley hastily added. We were just tired, and our joke escalated. We were really looking forward to the grandbaby. Eleanor's eyes were cold, her expression as hard as stone. Really? Then why didn't you visit Melissa once during her pregnancy? Why didn't you even come to the baby shower? Diane was at a loss for words. That was because we were busy. Busy? Eleanor repeated sarcastically. Your daughter is having her first child, and you think such an excuse is acceptable. A heavy silence fell over the room. Melissa shrank back in this tense situation while protectively holding Emma. Why did you come here today? Melissa finally asked. Her voice was small but steady. Diane hesitated and exchanged glances with Ashley. Because you're my daughter, and Emma is my first grandchild. Thomas scoffed. Is that all? Of course that's all. Diane raised her voice slightly. At that moment, Melissa saw Thomas give her a small nod. He was trying to communicate something. Mel, Thomas said gently. I think we should explain the real reason they came. Melissa looked at her husband in confusion. What do you mean? Last night, because of Eleanor and Robert's strong condemnation, their reputation was shattered overnight, Thomas explained quietly. Father instructed his lawyer to immediately cut off their financial support. Furthermore, because of Eleanor's connections, they are socially isolated. Diane's face turned pale. That's not. Thomas, don't say such things. It's not a lie, is it? Eleanor said severely. The members of the Boston Women's Charity Association already know about your behavior, and concerns about Ashley's character have been conveyed to her workplace. Ashley gasped. Don't do anything that would affect my career. That's unfortunate, Eleanor said coldly. Actions have consequences. Lying in bed, Melissa tried to understand the situation. Her mother and sister had come not out of genuine remorse, but to escape a social and economic crisis. Suddenly, something changed within Melissa. The anger she had suppressed for years began to burn like a quiet flame inside her. Looking at her newborn daughter, she clearly understood what kind of mother she wanted to be for Emma, one who would never hurt her daughter and would always put her first. Please leave, Melissa said quietly but firmly. The room fell silent. Excuse me? Diane asked as if she couldn't believe her ears. I want you to leave, Melissa repeated a little louder. There was a new strength in her eyes. You who called my daughter trash have no right to build a relationship with her. Melissa. Diane raised her voice. I am your mother. A mother is someone who cherishes her child, Melissa calmly retorted. You never cherished me. After Dad died, you didn't even hesitate to despise me. That's not true, Diane protested desperately. I love you. Love? Melissa gave a bitter smile. You came because the financial support from Robert was cut off, didn't you? Because Eleanor threatened your social reputation? Diane was at a loss for words. The flash of panic that momentarily appeared on her face confirmed Melissa's speculation. If money is your goal, that won't be fulfilled either, Melissa continued. I am no longer the obedient daughter who does whatever you say. For Emma's sake, and for my own, I've learned to set healthy boundaries. Ashley stepped forward and looked at Melissa with pleading eyes. Sis, we really regret what we did. Please give us another chance. Regret? Melissa said doubtfully. At the most important moment of my life, my delivery, you said my birthday was ruined. What are you regretting? Aren't you just afraid of what you'll lose? Ashley fell silent. There was no room for argument against Melissa's words. Please leave now, Melissa said finally. I'm tired, and Emma needs to rest. Diane made one last attempt at resistance. But Melissa, we're family. Real family cherishes each other, Melissa answered, borrowing Eleanor's words. Thomas, Eleanor, and Robert are my family. Whether you are part of that family can only be determined after seeing genuine change. Diane and Ashley had no words left to counter. The two left the hospital room in silence. As the door closed, Melissa exhaled deeply. Her body trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. But they were tears of release. Thomas sat beside her and took Melissa's hand. Mel, you're really strong. Yes, Eleanor smiled warmly. I'm truly proud. Melissa looked at Emma and quietly said, for this child I can be strong. A few days after giving birth, she and Emma returned home with Thomas and began their life as a new family. Thinking? Thomas quietly entered the room and placed his hand on Melissa's shoulder. Yes, a little. She smiled as she turned around. It's been 3 months since that day. Since the commotion after the birth, Melissa had not been in contact with her mother and sister at all. Eleanor and Robert visited frequently, enjoying plenty of time with their granddaughter. Melissa herself was gradually getting used to parenting, and her life was finding a new rhythm. Ready to go back to the hospital? Thomas gently asked. Melissa was scheduled to return to work part-time the following week. Yes, but I'm thinking of starting something new, she answered with determination. I want to establish a support group for mothers struggling with postpartum depression, and for people suffering from family relationships like I did. Thomas was surprised by her resolve but smiled proudly. That's a wonderful idea. You can definitely do it. Meanwhile, Diane and Ashley's lives had changed significantly. The cessation of financial support from Robert immediately impacted their lifestyle. Ashley had to look for a serious job for the first time, and Diane faced isolation in the local community. They learned firsthand the extent of Eleanor's influence. What do you mean I can't attend? Diane raised her voice on the phone. Her invitation to the Boston Women's Charity Association's annual party had suddenly been revoked. I'm sorry, but it's the committee's decision, she was told in a cold voice. Ashley also noticed her reputation at work plummeting. Cold glances from colleagues and her comments being ignored in meetings made her reflect on her actions for the first time. One day, a small voice. Melissa was always calm and kind. Maybe I was jealous of what she was doing. Melissa was always calm and kind. Maybe I was jealous of her. A letter arrived at Melissa's house when Emma was about 5 months old. The envelope was addressed in her mother's handwriting. Melissa picked up the envelope, hesitating whether to open it. Thomas sat next to her and quietly said, "It's your decision. What do you want to do?" She took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Dear Melissa, for many long years, I could not acknowledge the mistakes I made toward you. I sincerely apologize for calling your baby trash that day in the hospital. I won't make excuses. I was wrong. If possible, could I someday meet my granddaughter? Under whatever conditions you set. With love, Mom. Melissa finished reading the letter and quietly folded it. What will you do? Thomas gently asked. I can't decide right away, she answered quietly. If she shows real change, I might gradually consider rebuilding our relationship. But for now, she looked at Emma's crib. For now, protecting this child is my priority. Melissa stood by the window, gazing out at the world. Her life had changed dramatically. She was no longer just an obedient daughter, but had become a strong mother. She had learned through experience that blood ties alone don't define family. True love and respect are what form family bonds.